Hello, empowered former LDS family. This is a coaching call for the month of February 2021. I'm just doing some Tuesday night coaching. And the topic that I had to come up this week is about coping with anger and grief after leaving the church. We might get some people on tonight, but this first 15 minutes, I'm just going to talk to you about this coping strategy. And if you want to get on or anybody gets on later, then all of that will not be recorded because people like to keep that a little bit more censored and quiet. They have a lot of private personal things going on in their life and we don't need it recorded, but this training will definitely record it. So coping with anger and grief after leaving. I wanted to start with this quote by Nelson Mandela. He said, "As I walked out of the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." So for many of us, we can be out of the church for 5, 10, 20 years, but we're still orienting ourselves with the church. This is a natural thing, but it doesn't have to be that way. We're either Mormon or we're ex-Mormon, but how do we extract that Mormon out of us is really learning to reconcile our emotions and learning to be able to neutralize it and put it behind us so we can completely face forward and create a whole new life. And sometimes we do that through time. We do that, by osmosis. Something happens, we're able to let it go. Sometimes we can go through therapy and get a good portion of it out. But mostly it's about understanding how to process your emotions. And if faith crisis is nothing else, it's an opportunity for you to learn new skills and learn how to process your emotions. We just live in a time and age where people with emotional intelligence are going to be the ones that are going to lead out in the future. And so this is your epic opportunity to understand your emotions. So let's specifically work with anger and grief. Anger comes in all kinds of forms. It actually stems from fear. And fear of losing your family, fear of what's going to happen to you the next life, fear that you're going to be lied to again, fear that you're going to lose your family if you leave, fear that what's going to happen to your family if you stay. We have so much fear going on, but when we deal with the anger, a lot of us feel like there's an injustice going on, and an injustice that happened to us, and an injustice that kept us limited and frustrated in our growth and development. And we feel like we have been lied to, which is a feeling of betrayal. And so these are natural emotions that come up when we learn that something we thought was the reality of all things in life and gave us an entire worldview and the next life view, the pre-existence and the next life view is now collapsing. And we see the theories and the theology continue to be perpetuated, and we can, now that we've stepped back, and see how it's affecting our family members and how limiting that actually is, that we couldn't see that until we stepped away. And so there's a lot of emotions that come up with that, and there's just some strategy they wanted to work with you on and help you with, and I hope that you find it helpful, and that is writing it down. Sometimes we let these feelings and emotions run unsupervised in our mind, and we never take the time to extract them by writing them down. There's something that happens between your mind and transforming your thoughts into words and getting them out of your mind and being able to look at them more objectively. And so try this exercise. Write down what makes you angry. Why am I angry? You can use this with any emotion. Why do I feel betrayed? Why am I having this feeling and that feeling? And then just start chasing it. Well, I'm angry because I feel like I've been lied to my whole life. I feel like I could have made different choices had I not been under this influence of the church. Write those things down so that they're not swirling around unsupervised in your mind. When you have, we only have so much bandwidth. And if you have all of these random feelings and emotions going on in your mind, it's hard to create space for new. And that's what we want, is we want to rebirth ourselves into something new. And so this is a process of weeding out the old and being able to identify and look at it in different ways and being able to extract it basically, so it's not affecting your thought process, because your mind and your thoughts are the powers of creation. And if they are contaminated with these emotions of fear, anger, and betrayal for long periods of time, then you start to create a mood. That mood can be somber, even down to depressed, and even suicidal, unfortunately. Then what happens is, after we have this mood for a while, it turns into an attitude. Now, an attitude carries with it a vibration, and that vibration starts to be a signature of your body, and you start to attract other people who are still in that angry place. This is why on ex-Mormon sites, we see so many gather together, and they're feeding off of each other because they're resonating at the same altitude or the same attitude. And so this happens through time, and it happens unconsciously. So we can't blame ourselves and get mad and feel like we're stupid. We just don't know how these things happen. So that's why I want to articulate it for you so it can be helpful. And so once we've got it written it down on paper, part of doing that work is looking at, I'm angry because, and whatever you wrote, then go to the place of asking, is it true? It could be true. I'm not saying none of it's true. I'm just saying, is it true? Let's take the idea of, I've been lied to my whole life. That makes me angry. I'm angry because I have been lied to my whole life. And then you go to this idea of, is it true? And the truth behind that is, nobody lied to you intentionally. You were under a very subtle and complex influence that was either taught to you by your parents, but regardless, it was most likely taught to you by somebody who had your best interest in mind because they thought it was the truth. And they didn't know any better. No one intentionally deceived you, and no one intentionally kept you under that influence. One of the things that helps you to break away from that is understand that so many people were born under the influence of some specific religion. We're in a time now where a lot of children are being born who aren't really indoctrinated as heavy as maybe my generation or generations older. And so we're just born in that situation, and we didn't know there was any other way. And we were taught not to look outside of that, and you were obedient to that. And so when you see the whole big picture, all we can do at this point, because here's number 3, is there anything you can do about that? Is there anything I can do about the fact that I was taught my whole life about this thing that's kept me limited? Can I change it? And many times we'll go to this idea that we can make a difference in the church and that we can change the church from the inside. And I know for me, I spent about 2 years trying to, have an inspiring quote to say that might expand somebody's mind in Relief Society or whatever. Bear my testimony and try to, pepper it with little spices of consciousness. Did it really do any difference? No, it didn't. But just little me thought, I could make a difference. The truth is, there was nothing I could do about it. Some people are called to challenge the church and expose the church, but you're going to know if that's you or not. If you're just dabbling in it because you still have those feelings of, I want to make a difference, somebody's got to pay for what has happened to me, you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to fight a gigantic organization who really doesn't care about you. They never really have. They cared about your time, your talents, your resources you're in, and all the things wherewith the Lord has blessed you with. I think that's what the temple covenant is. And so they don't really care about you. You were like an automaton in their system. And once we can see that and realize no one was against us, it was an old, outdated system that we were born into and we're breaking away from, it kind of eases a lot of that fear and that anger behind it. So 1, write down, I'm angry because. 2, is it true? Is there any way different way I can look at it? And 3, can I do anything about it? If not, it's something that I'm ready to let go, or I will eventually be ready to let go. Then you're going to want and kind of already talked about this a little bit, you're going to want to observe your urge to retaliate. I know for me, I just wanted to post all over Facebook, all the wrongs and injustices that I saw. And like I said, I wanted to say something in testimony meeting, but I never got to the point where I get up there and just completely point out all the problems. I tried to do it in a way that was harmonic. Um, this urge to retaliate is like I said, is something that will take a lot of your time, a lot of your focus, and a lot of your effort. So what I encourage you to do is to take a break and take a little sabbatical from church. For some of us, we actually make a commitment with our still believing spouse that we'll go. But you have to be honest with whether that's healthy for you and whether it's healthy for the marriage. If it's not healthy for you, it's not healthy for the marriage. And what happens when we keep going to church is it keeps re-triggering us and re-wounding us. And the more we can see what's going on, the more trauma we actually experience. And so taking that time away allows you to learn how to breathe your own air and to break away. I know for me, when I was going to church, it would take me until Wednesday until I could get regrounded in my own energy because I was so frustrated with what was going on. And so taking your time away, and luckily 2020 has been a great time for people who needed a sabbatical to have an excuse because of the COVID situation. So you can see that when you take time away and you step away from it, that you're going to start breathing your own air. So this thing that I'm telling you right now is something that you also need to practice when you're getting too much ex-LDS information. You're breathing that system, and that's a lot of emotional stuff going on. And so, and a lot of times we need that validation. We need to be able to hear other people's perspectives so that we feel like we're not alone. But at some point, you've got to recognize, okay, I know what it tastes like to breathe LDS air. I know what it tastes like to breathe ex-LDS air. But what does it feel like to breathe my own air and my own freedom? And that's where I love Nelson Mandela's quote, where he says, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, and this is where you're doing, you're just at a point of having so much mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual liberation right now, and we fight it and resist it, and we're so afraid that it will happen, and if we stay bitter and angry and emotionally and engaged in it, and a lot of times we do that because we don't know what's going to happen without all that. At least we can have fragments of what was familiar. What you're doing is you're stepping out into the unknown, and it's can be scary. And so we tend to just really dangle on into the things that were familiar for us, and that validation of knowing that other people feel the same way and being associated with groups where other people feel the same way can keep us really stagnant and keep us stuck like glue into that dysfunction. And so when you're starting to feel that urge, and that's why I encourage you to come into this group, and I encourage the group to stay in that space of facing forward and identifying things that will help bring resolution to this crisis that you're going through. So take time away both from the church, and then when you're ready, take time away from the ex-LDS scene so that you know what it feels like to breathe your own air. Okay. And I kind of mixed this one up. I hope it's not too confusing for you. But when we're talking about the betrayal, asking if the betrayal is real, was it intentional? Understanding that we're born in a paradigm, and that's how the world was operating at that time, and nobody knew any better. Well, I think the higher ups know at a certain level what's going on, but your parents and the people that you're associated with were not really trying to deceive you. And then being able to reconcile that. Well, I'm not going to go into that because I kind of had it out of sequence there, and we've already talked about that. But then one thing to help relieve from betrayal is to examine the relationship and what your relationship was with the church. For me, I was completely codependent. I was codependent on the church, and I gave away way too much of my power. I was very much invested and very much involved, and I did give my time, talents, and everything wherewith the Lord had blessed me with to the church. I was going to the temple once a week. I kind of sucked on my food storage, but other than that, I was like the best Mormon I ever knew. Anyway, so examine your relationship. And what happened is I realized that the relationship was really one-sided. For all the effort that I was putting into the church, I was getting very little back. I wasn't getting spiritual development back. I thought I had friendships and I thought I had community. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But what I realized is that I was putting so much into the church and getting very, very little in return. And when you start to grow up and create boundaries for yourself, you start to realize you do not need to be in those types of relationships, that's not healthy for you. The church and the theology is set up to make you codependent on the church. So let's look at that for a minute. We've been taught to make the church so important. And one of the things we have to do is stop making the church so important. And understanding this codependency is one of the main things for that. So ask yourself, what have I really lost by leaving? And this is where the grieving is going to help neutralize. What have I really lost? Here are some of the things that I came up with. I encourage you to do this exercise on your own, but ask yourself, what have I really lost? And allow yourself, this is part of you redeveloping your intuition, allow yourself the things that you can identify that you really lost. A lot of yours are going to be similar than mine, and you might come up with things different than mine. I hope that you do. So what have I really lost? Here's a list that I had. Stability, my certainty about God and the afterlife and where I'm going and where I'm headed and what I'm supposed to do with my life. Routine. I lost routine. I lost safety, or what I thought was safety. I thought I was safely in God's fold so that I would qualify for the eternal heavens. And so to me, that was this idea of safety. I lost friends, or at least who I thought were my friends. And I lost community. And I know that's probably those are some of the hardest things that we have to deal with as we're leaving, that we grieve. I lost my identity, but the truth is I lost the identity that the church had given me. I had never really established an identity of my own because I was born into the covenant. And so I didn't know what it felt like to not be Mormon. So another thing is I lost relationships. I also lost my business because I was coaching primarily LDS women about spiritual principles. And so when I came clean that I was no longer believing, my whole business that I had grown for 12 years collapsed. So I write down those things and then I say, did I really lose them? So did I lose stability? I lost the idea of stability. I am really no more stable. I was no more stable in the church than I am now. In my mind, it felt like the structure the church had created had given it weight, stability, and like a container. But is that really where I wanted to live? Is that in this space and that limitation? Is that really what I wanted? The next thing is certainty. Did I really lose certainty? I lost certainty about the church. I didn't lose certainty about life. I actually opened up the door for all kinds of other possibilities. And quite frankly, living in a place of certainty, although it feels stable, is very restricted, confined, and doesn't allow you to grow. Did I lose routine? Yes, I did, but it allowed me the freedom to start establishing my own routine. And giving my time, talents, resources, all with which the Lord has blessed me with, to myself and my own growth and my own development and what it is I wanted in the world and to what it meant to me to be a sovereign authority in my life. Did I lose safety? Safety from what? An angry God. Actually, I am so much happier that I don't have to live under the rule of that God that I was taught in Mormonism. That was actually a relief, but it felt like safety. It was relief when I left. Did I lose friends? No, I lost comrades. I lost people whose friendship was so fragile and so superficial that having a different belief system would cause that friendship and relationship to collapse. there's nothing like faith transition out of toxic religion and something as highly practices undue influence at the level of the LDS Church. It's so difficult to realize that we become codependent on the church to provide us friends and to provide us community. I don't know about you, but if you ever moved, you were established in the ward, you had friends, everybody thought alike, and that is not actually real life. That is just not how it is. So that was one of the things that I have someone trying to get in. I'll have to have her come in a minute. The next thing was my identity. Yes, I did lose the identity the church gave me. I already kind of talked about this, but I started to develop my own identity. And that's like a whole nother coaching call on how to reestablish your identity. But I established identity that felt true and authentic for me. And I also started to develop a community that was more authentic to me, who understood who I was and was not contingent on whether or not I believed the same. As far as relationships, yeah, I did lose some relationships, primarily with family members. And that is the nature of the indoctrination, unfortunately. What I've tried to do in those relationships is to let others know that I love them just the same, and I'm just me, and I'll be here for them just the same. But the truth is those relationships were so heavily indoctrinated into the church that everything we talked about was church, church, church. Same with my community, church, church, church. And it's not until you step away for a while and you go back in that you realize every sentence is peppered with the church, 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 and just how much you are a robot of indoctrination and you're just on their merry-go-round. Or as Elder Halden calls it, maybe it's Elder Ballard. I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but you're on their ship, is what I'm trying to say. So that's when I say, have I really lost something? Or it feels like I've lost something. And that's how we kind of learn to deal with the grieving. And the minute that you start to find those authentic relationships, that emptiness and that void begins to get filled. Let me add these two in here. Hello, Janine and Leanne. I'm just finishing up a training. Give me about 2 more minutes. And then I want to take on your questions or even just chit chat if you want to. So give me just a minute. So as you recognize whether or not it really is something that you've lost, and you can reconcile that, then some magic starts to happen. You start to create resilience in the place of trauma. But the list that you're making right now is a list of your inner work. That is your inner strategy, and it's going to be unique to you. If there's nothing more you learn from exiting the church, is that now you get to be an individual. And you get to be able to go at a pace that works for you, and that you get to be led by your intuitive instincts rather than some program. So let's see, resilience. Almost done, Leanne. I'll add you guys on. So one of the things that I wrote, and it's in my book that I'm writing about dragonflies and the parallels of exiting the church, is how we turn that trauma into resilience. And I want to share that with you. I'm just going to read it straight from my book. It wasn't until I discovered that I was being deceived by the source that I was conditioned to trust the most, that I learned to trust the voice within. It wasn't until I lost my superficial community of church friends that I began seeking real, lasting, authentic relationships. It wasn't until I lost the identity that had been given to me through indoctrination that I discovered who I really am. It wasn't until I lost relevance within my family and my friends, my children and my parents, because I left, that I stopped trying to please them all and I stopped betraying myself. It wasn't until I lost membership in the church that claims to be the one and only true church that I found deeper association with God and all of humanity. Evidently, I needed to be told what to think and believe in order to appreciate the privilege and freedom of thinking for myself. The trick is to transform your pain and suffering into resilience and power. I understand that the grief is unbearable at times, and I realize the earth feels like it's crumbling beneath you. I know it's lonely and scary, and sometimes you doubt you're making the right choice. But after the life quake and digging to find yourself through the rubble, you can rebirth yourself into a better version of you. So no one can convince me I've been a victim of the church, because all I feel now is that I have been gifted. There is a certain signature of trauma that we have experienced by being wounded in the same house. And that the gifts that are available as we work through this process are substantial, that we can become a unique set of not, what is the word I'm looking, unique set, what is the word that I'm looking for? I have another author on here that could help me. But it's a unique set of superpowers, I guess is the word that I can say, that can influence the world for good. If we can turn that trauma into resilience, and we can become a greater version of ourselves and feel more authentic and empowered and directed. So I hope that helps you with your dealing with anger and grief, and that you are able to transcend, translate, transform all of those emotions into a deep compassion, deep understanding, and a greater vision for your future. Hope that was helpful.